So let's talk about the big deal launch box that's going to be coming for Warhammer 40k 10th edition, where in my opinion, Games Workshop's already given us a very good idea of exactly what's going to be coming in it. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today I thought we'd put together our teasers of the 10th edition launch so far, where based on previous editions' launches, Games Workshop's current trends, and their model preview and teaser trailer, I feel like we can put together a really good idea of what we're going to be getting in the big launch box for this new edition of the game. Obviously treat this all as a prediction at this point. I'm sure there'll be plenty of stuff that comes out to contradict this over the next few weeks, but I genuinely think that the guesses here won't fall too far off the mark. Games Workshop just does have a certain way of doing things these days. First up, perhaps the easiest way to work out what 10th edition is going to bring is that it's almost certainly going to be a rerun of the 9th edition launch with Indomitus. The way that Games Workshop released that was that they had a big launch box followed up by some smaller starter sets. The launch box focused on the models and just getting tons of new sculpts at really quite a good value for them, but that was only a limited time offering, and then swiftly after that the starter sets came out. They're more aimed at newer players getting into Warhammer 40k for the first time. The reason that they're not likely to deviate too far from this was that Indomitus in 9th edition was the best-selling box that Games Workshop has ever made. They printed a spectacular amount of them and still sold out in minutes. It wasn't exactly a cheap box set either, at £125, €155 or $199. Games Workshop will absolutely want to try and replicate this success, and a new edition of Warhammer 40k is the best way that they can do it. I feel like a fair chunk of the world being sat around in lockdown in 2020 probably helped build hype for it. It was a fun thing to look forward to and really quite exciting, but it really does feel that Games Workshop is really going all guns blazing to make this box set a massive deal, so we're probably going to see something like Indomitus but maybe even bigger and better, repeating the success and trying to draw as many people into Warhammer 40k with its new and easier rule set as they possibly can. First up, I think we can have a reasonable stab at the price. Indomitus was £125 or $199 back in 2020, and this was a bit above Games Workshop's standard Battle Force pricing at the time. That was around about $185. Since then, inflation and Games Workshop's prices have both crept on. Currently, the Battle Force kits now go for £130 or $210, so my guess would be that it will probably be a little bit north of that, but offer significantly more miniatures. Maybe around about the mark of £140, €180 or $230, though perhaps another recent precedent that we could draw on would be the Horus Heresy Age of Darkness box set, and that was significantly more than that, up at £180 or around about $300. In general, I'd expect it to be somewhere in this price bracket, the same or below as the Horus Heresy one, but probably the same or above the cheaper estimate. I feel like we can probably even have a fairly good stab at the box art, given that Games Workshop's previews have come out recently. When they did their initial 9th edition launch, they showed off the poster childs of the edition. It seems like Terminators are going to be one of the iconic centerpiece models for this box set, and I feel like this Terminator on the right, with the new artwork that looks kinda classic in its own way, I feel like he's going to be the headline act that we're going to get instead of the Primaris Lieutenant on the box cover. Here's my slightly terrible Photoshop of new box art over the Indomitus box. I think Mr. Terminator does do quite a good job of replacing the Lieutenant though, and I suspect that he might well be backed up by those Tyranid gaunts showcasing the other half of the Force. We don't know what it'll be called yet, maybe something to do with the Fourth Tyrannic War or some sort of conflict within that. I'm going to go with the name Big Nid Party here. Maybe it'll be some sort of subtle variation of that. Starting to put things together then, first up we've got a big launch box that's probably retailing somewhere between $230 and $300, and then inside will be some supporting stuff, and then 2 armies, one for Space Marines and one for Tyranids. For supporting stuff, I don't think that they'll be deviating from their normal way of doing things, putting the big edition core rulebook in the book, probably a special edition of the book as they often do with these launch box type things. We got a slightly different funky cover on the Indomitus one as opposed to when they sold it separately after that. I'm pretty sure they'll still have the big print core book as well as the free downloadable rules. It'll just be an either or type thing, plus the gallery for all their models and the lore of the factions. And I'm pretty sure that it won't have 10th edition on the cover as well. Games Workshop don't seem to number their editions besides in retrospect. This one is very much just going to be the current Warhammer 40k core book and won't be marketed as 10th. Besides that, I suspect that will be backed up by a paper get you started type book, the datasheets for exactly the units inside and no more. Maybe or maybe not a little bit of supporting army rules, but that seems like that might be redundant compared with their digital downloads. They said they would have one detachment per army, so you'd probably just use those for Tyranids and Space Marines. As with Indomitus, it seems kinda likely that they won't go for supporting stuff, seeing as Indomitus did quite so well. Probably no terrain, as it takes up a vast quantity of the box, and people just don't generally find it quite as exciting as more miniatures. It's definitely useful to have, but might be more present in the starter boxes, like now. And Indomitus also didn't have things like dice or range rules and things. I think Games Workshop does like to make their boxes directly playable out of the set, but in reality it's not really that hard to acquire yourself a tape measure and some dice, and I feel like that these will be skimped out of compared with certain starter sets, and just devote all of the space and value to the models. Putting that together, that would give us a big box, plus a core rulebook and a smaller slimmed down paper datasheet booklet to allow you to play with all the snazzy new miniatures. Talking of the miniatures themselves, they were quite a generous offering in Indomitus. Not very often that you get 60 Warhammer 40k miniatures, all new sculpts at that kind of price from Games Workshop. Warhammer's definitely expensive, but Indomitus was arguably one of the best deals that they'd done in a very long time. At 9th edition launch, it added up to two equal forces of roughly 1,000 points each. I'm sure that was also by design. Theoretically somewhat balanced against each other, though in reality the Space Marines were a bit more powerful on the drop, their army rules just being generally better. In 9th edition, this box set tied in very closely with Games Workshop's intro cinematic that they came out with, the one where they had a Sister of Battle and a Space Marine duking it out against the Necrons, and basically every single new miniature that was seen in that trailer did appear in this box. The cinematic did feature a few current units, say a Battle Sister squad, some Intercessors, and some Cadian shock troops, but anything that appeared in the trailer and was completely new was featured in here. On the Space Marine side, it confirmed things like the Assault Intercessors and the very specific Captain and Lieutenant, the Captain with that skeleton on his shield. And on the Necron side, we saw the new design for the Warriors and Scarabs, the Scorpec Destroyers with their great big power blades, and also the big bad Scorpec Lord rearing his head at the end of the trailer. As I've talked about in a couple of previous videos, I think they've gone even further down the line this time. There's more new units revealed in the 10th edition reveal trailer, and I strongly suspect it's going to tie in incredibly closely with the contents of this box set. First up, starting with the Space Marine half, in the trailer we saw the Terminator Captain and Librarian, a Phobos Lieutenant, a Gravis Apothecary, and possibly an Ancient towards the end. For squads and vehicles, we also had the new Terminators, which have been shown off, a squad of Primaris armed exclusively with Flamers, a Combi Weapons Veteran squad, and a ranged version of the Redemptor with missiles and las cannons. I must admit, one copy of each of these units would fit in near perfectly with the equivalents from the Indomitus contents. The Indomitus box had 5 characters, and there's 5 characters in the trailer. There's 60 Marines in the Indomitus box, 10 of them being troops, and 5 of them being elites, and then again that would work really well with the squad equivalents. And then I feel like it's really not too much of a stretch to replace the chunky Outrider bikes with one big Dreadnought. The Space Marine side of things really does seem to fit in pretty perfectly, at least on paper. Putting that together with the details of the miniatures in the trailer, first up we'd have a Terminator Captain with Power Sword and Stormbolter, that jazzy Librarian with the Force Axe and the wrist-mounted Stormbolter. I'm substituting in a few near-equivalent miniatures that Games Workshop has. The Phobos Lieutenant, who has a bit of a viewpoint character in the trailer. He's armed with a Combi Flamer but doesn't appear to have a grav shoot or anything. And the possibility of a banner-bearing Ancient in the final fight shot. Looks like he just had a bolt pistol and was clad in standard Mark 10 armour, though we didn't really get a very clear look at him. Then with the actual models for Terminators showed off, seems likely that they'll be sticking to their standard squad of 5 of those. The heavy weapon will be an assault cannon, and it looked like the Sergeant still had a power sword in this one, so very much a traditional loadout there, just bigger and upscaled. For the Flamer Marines, I'm a little bit less certain how many we might get. My suspicion is that they're probably actually going to be a troops choice for Space Marines, as basically they are kind of close-range anti-infantry weapons, and unlike, say, things like Hellblasters or Eradicators, I'm just not really sure it makes sense to put them in elites or heavy support. They'd probably be fairly vicious against light infantry, but not particularly great against heavily armoured things like vehicles or heavy infantry. I suspect that we'd get somewhere like 5 to 10 of them within the box. I guess it might be 10 if they mirror the Assault Intercessors there, though I guess that would bump up the model count a bit more than Indomitus. Next, we also saw some ranged veterans within the trailers. Didn't really see the entire squad at once, but there was a Combi Melter on the Sergeant, Combi Flamers and Combi Grav when fighting the Carnifex, and then later in the trailer one of them had a Hellstorm Heavy Bolter type variant similar to the Heavy Intercessors. My guess is that we're going to have these models as sort of a ranged veteran squad like Sternguard, kind of similar to how we had the Blade Guard in Indomitus, giving us Primaris ranged veterans, now we have Primaris melee ones. We have our Gravis Apothecary as well, who was mauled to death while fighting lictors. That's to put our character count up to 5, the same as Indomitus. And then finally, in place of those Outriders, we'd have our Redemptor Dreadnought with the missile launcher and las cannons. I'd guess this would be an easy build version of the kit, kinda similar to how we had an easy build Redemptor in 8th. I'd not be too surprised if Games Workshop came out and released a multi-part one later, perhaps with some other arms like autocannons. Putting that all together, it does look like a fairly plausible looking little Space Marine force. There could certainly be some surprises, some things unexpectedly present or absent, but I feel like the force is probably going to be pretty close to that. Then for the other side of the army, of course, we have the Tyranids. I'd argue that compared with the Space Marines, the Tyranids maybe aren't quite as obvious as to exactly what sort of numbers they might appear in. Space Marines are all very regimented, have some very set squad numbers in the lore, and you can easily tell the bits of war gear apart. With Tyranids, they can be a bit more freeform, they can add in monsters of various different sizes and purposes, and might change the amounts of numbers that they had in a squad or exactly how you field them. Currently, from the reveal trailer, the internet's maybe not quite as decided on what the identity of every single Tyranid organism is, but these are the guesses that I feel are most likely at the moment, though of course Games Workshop will likely clarify and show us what's right over the next few days and weeks. In terms of the reveal, they actually seem to be sort of character light. I think that the box set is going to be headed up by that winged prime that tore the Terminator apart, and the only other one that looks clearly like a character might be the big psychic abomination, unless they may be counting a lictor as a character. Otherwise, just throughout the cinematic, we saw termagants and hormagaunts, biovores and lictors, some sort of middling sized feeder monster, plus that screamer killer Carnifex that tore its way through the Space Marine squad. I guess we'll be looking to make something similar to the Necron half of Indomitus. That one had 20 warriors, 4 characters, a couple of Cryptothralls and 6 Scarabs, 3 Scorpex and their Plasmacytes, plus the bigger Canoptek Reanimator. First up, certainly the Tyranid with the most character in the trailer was this winged prime thing. I personally think that he's far too small and looks too different to be a flying hive tyrant, though he does look superficially similar. I think he's going to be a new winged HQ choice, maybe a leader for Tyranid Shrikes if we get those, though at this point he could certainly just be a single model out of a Shrike squad. Then, with how prominent that Screamer Killer Carnifex was in the trailer, I feel like he's almost certainly going to be making an appearance in the box. I'd guess not replacing the current Carnifex kits, but just being an actual model to represent Screamer Killers as a variant. 4 great big talons, and vomiting some bioplasma all over the Space Marines, not something that you really want to get in the way of. Then, kind of equivalent to the Necron Warriors, I'd guess something like 20 odd Gaunts in the box, something to make the faction feel pretty hoardy. It seems pretty much guaranteed that we'll get at least some Termagants there. I suppose the second squad could be a Hormagaunt squad or something, but I feel like there's a fair likelihood that we just get 20 Termagants and the Hormagaunts might be a different release. I suspect as we got Scarab Swarms for the Necrons, we'll probably get some Tyranid Rippers as well. I think the Games Workshop mentioned somewhere that they'd still be present on the Termagant sprue, so depending on how many Rippers we have on the Termagant sprues and how many Termagant sprues we get, I'd guess somewhere between 2 and 6 Ripper Swarms. Then, given how prominent they were in multiple parts in the trailer, I feel like it's likely that we get new lictors in the box. It might just be one acting like a bit of an assassin character, seeing as this half of the box seems kind of character light, or they might treat them a bit more like a unit and give us 3 of them. I guess there might be a bit more scope for that. If they're not selling them in individual resin kits of 1, they could have a squad of 3 and have them operate a bit differently if they wanted. We certainly saw multiple of them mobbing that apothecary. For some medium-sized beasties, we might get 1 or more biovores, again a kit that really needs an update. We see a pair of them take out the ranged Redemptor, and I feel like that might make it a bit more likely that we might get 2 of them as opposed to 1 or 3. And seeing as the old kit comes with some Spore Mines, it's possible that we might get some of those as well if biovores are in. Then we had a couple of feeder-type beasts that got pulverized by the Space Marine with the Assault Cannon. These are medium-sized monsters that people seem to think look like Toxicrins, Harrispexes, or Malanthropes. In reality, I don't think that it's any of the 3 of those. They do have some different features to all of them in my opinion. Plus in general, I think that they just look a little bit smaller. We see 2 of them pictured in the trailer, so I'd guess probably 1 or 2 of them in the box. Maybe kind of similar to how that Canoptek Reanimator was on the Necron side. A smaller support monster, maybe not a major frontline thing, but might hand out some buffs to Tyranid organisms for eating dead prey or something. Finally, the last and most ominous thing in the trailer was what looked like a giant zoanthrope, a great big Norn crown or something over an exposed brain, and it has 2 little attendant organisms floating alongside it. I'd say maybe due to its late entry and the fact that it seems quite big, I'd say that this might be the least likely thing in the trailer to be making it into the launch box. It definitely could be there, and I feel like maybe it's a bit more likely if we get lower numbers of the things that I've estimated the numbers of. Maybe just one Bivore and one Lictor might leave enough room for this thing. I have seen a few people theorising that this could be a version of the Tyranid Big Bad for 10th edition, maybe the Tyranid version of the Silent King given the little floating attendants. Not sure whether we'll get this guy in the box set or not. I feel like it's perhaps a bit less likely because it does look pretty massive from the trailer. If it is a little bit smaller than you might expect though, then perhaps it could be here, maybe another character to go alongside that winged thing. So anyway, putting that all together, Space Marines, Tyranids, box art, and books, this is my current first guess as to what might well be coming in a 10th edition launch box. I feel like we're going to see quite a lot of new Space Marines and Tyranids realised in miniatures from the trailers over the next few weeks. Should be interesting to take a look at, and it'll be fun to see how well this compares with reality after Games Workshop actually makes the full announcement for it. Let me know what you make of the guesses down in the comments below. What would you most like to see in a big 10th edition style Indomitus box? I'll look forward to hearing your thoughts. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. I've made plenty of other videos covering Games Workshop's announcement with 10th edition, so feel free to check them out on the channel if you'd like to see more. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the coverage, then I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. That's the thing that allows me to make all these videos quite so regularly for you guys to watch by working on these instead of a normal job. If you are enjoying regularly, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. I feel like that one might be something to watch in the future. The one for early May will be the Lion, and then the one for June will be whatever the 10th edition launch box turns out to be. I'll certainly be posting out a few of these. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.